Dave here, Performance Corner. Gonna get into our N attack build. So what would happen is on the N attack, it's basically R35. It's got to be brand new or less than 5,000 miles on the vehicle to start with, and it's got to be a NISMO edition because the NISMO edition has a different performance parts. The NISMO edition actually has the same turbos as a GT3 car, so it's a fairly stock engine in those regards. And the bumpers, the rear deck lid are carbon fiber from the factory, plus a little bit of stuff that it has additionally that you can see on the car that's carbon fiber, like the side skirts and whatnot. But basically at that point, we take in this car and we have the car and we get all the parts. The parts literally can take up a 20 by 20 room when you unpackage them and inspect them. The inspection period takes at least a day, just because you have to go through all the components, compare them to the build sheet, and so you go through all that. I mean, it goes from big things like the exhaust, the new carbon fiber front fenders, to small nuts, bolts, clips. This car has to be given back to the customer in the same and or actually better condition because it has all the performance parts to the customer as if it rolled off the dealer's lot, meaning that any clip that was removed because you had to take wires out, anything that's plastic that got broken has to be replaced. So when they ship you the kit, you have everything. I mean, new factory clips, new bearings, new shims, for diffs and stuff like that. So it's a really complete kit. There's actually two kits. I'm not going to go over the smaller kit, which is basically the handling and aero and lacks the engine and drivetrain performance components. I'm not going to get into that. I'm just going to go all in with the complete build. So, which is A. B package is a small package. So so once you get you've done inventory of all your components, then you have to arrange them in such a position that and know which you're gonna have to do first, second, third, because it's just a ton of stuff. You need a lot of space, and not only that, not only do you have all the components that you just inventoried, but now you got to start taking the car apart, on your lift, and have shelving to store all this components that you're taking off, that you're putting aside, and whatnot. Some things don't get put back on, like you're going to replace the rear wing with a new wing, so you have to take off the old wing. You have differential, so you have some large components that are going to be replaced, so you have to have a large amount of storage space also. So once you get that part, you've inventoried everything, you get the car on the lift, and I start in the heart of the beast. I go straight for the front differential and the rear differential. In the front differential, we have to remove the engine, so you drop that from the bottom, you drop it out the bottom, so that's the heart of the beast. But we have to paint fenders because we get carbon fiber front fenders, and they have little winglets on the side, and so they get painted to match. They're beautiful parts. The carbon fiber that they make in-house was originally made by Williams F1 team, but they make it in-house now. Everything was done through them and then brought in-house with the molds. And to my knowledge, you have to train 2 years of making carbon fiber and working with it before you can actually make the dedicated component parts. So it's like in a 2-year apprenticeship. And I guess, if you're into food and stuff and sushi, you'll know that a sushi chef, you learn how to cook rice for like 5 years before you can, move on and past the rice and get to the fish. So it's kind of the same thing. You gotta be really good at making the material. And I'll give you an example. On the rear wing, it's adjustable, and there's different, because most wings that you see on cars today, you'll see the aluminum structure that holds the main wing. On this, there's the aluminum structure that bolts to the rear deck lid, which is carbon fiber. But those rear mounts that are aluminum, which are beautiful and by no means need to be covered, are covered by carbon fiber pieces. And when you intertwine each carbon fiber piece, because there's multiple adjustments, so they have different pieces that fit together depending on how high you go, what setting you have, and all that. You change the carbon fiber pieces. All those weaves are continuous. There's no breaking points. You can't tell. It looks like everything was cut from one weave. I mean, literally, like they took one big piece of carbon fiber, cut exactly what it needs, and molded it together. So no matter which pieces put together, it looks the same. It's the attention to detail, and I think that's one of the things that makes this car so great. In America, we don't seem to care about that, but it's really is a magnificent piece of art on one level, and a terrific machine. So for me, I was ecstatic to be able to go there and work in Japan. But even more so, I think I was more overcome by just the attention to detail and how everything worked out on this car. So getting back to the build, we would first take all the fenders off, the front fenders off, and we'd have to send them out to get color matched. So what I would actually do before I take the fenders off, I have a tool that measures gap, and I would go through and I would measure the gap in 3 to 5 places on the door and on the hood. Everywhere there was a gap, I measured how much, and I wrote down on a piece of tape to note that there's this much gap in this section between the door and the fender, between the hood and the fender. And while the whole front end got taken off as far as the fenders and hood, I would measure all the gaps, because all that had to be put back together in stock form or better. So all the paint matching could be done in the United States, except for they have like a matte gray color, and that was actually the first car I did was a matte gray. Those actually we had to send a factory fender and the 2 carbon fiber fenders back to Japan, and those could only be painted in Japan. I believe there's something in the painting process that's allowed there that isn't allowed here. It's a very hard color to match, and because batches of paint are made and sometimes they're slightly off, we had to send back, just like here, you have to give them something to match because the whole car match, and they sent it back painted and stuff. So that one we had to wait a while because we had to ship them back, let them get painted, and then ship them back here to the US. So once we get the fenders off into the paint, because this is about a 6-week project depending on the build and or how you get pulled off and put on other things in between. But if you were able to stay on it, it's supposed to be a 2-person build actually, and they said 4 to 6 weeks, which is definitely possible. My 2 European counterparts, Rudy is one of the guys. They could do it, and him and his partner could do it in definitely 4 weeks to 5 weeks. They were actually did a little bit different than here. Ours had to come to our shop and do it in-house. They covered Europe, and in Europe they would go to the cars and work in various shops, Nissan dealers. They did a little bit different than here. So but anyways, so we would we got that, we'd pull it apart, and then I would get ready to pull the engine and the rear differential out. In the rear, pulling the engine out is really just to pull the front diff off, the carrier housing, and we actually had to machine it out and to fit the new differential in there, which is like a 1.5 way diff or a one-way diff. There's some technicality in there, but it took up some more space, so we had to, and you had to be careful because you couldn't go too far because one of the bolt holes actually didn't have enough material and you'd end up in a bolt, so you had a possibility for a leak there. But all that is quite a bit of work, and then you had to reassemble it back into the car. The rear diff was the same thing. You had to pull the transmission out to pull the diff, and all the diffs had to be, the braking points had to be checked before and after. The rear actually has adjustable braking points, which can be adjusted in the car with pulling the axle stubs out. That was one of the nicest diffs I've done. I've done a lot of diffs in different cars and stuff, and that was definitely one of the nice limited slip differentials where you can actually change it in the car without taking the whole part out and redoing it and reshimming it. But yeah, so this is when you look at the fenders were incredible. I actually didn't want to paint the fenders, but it was something that was definitely necessary through Nissan and NISMO. They wanted the fenders painted, but they were beautiful. I mean, there's no inclusions in any of the clearing. Actually, those were dry, I believe. But yeah, they were perfect, and every part was just amazing to work with. So that's how you begin. And I mean, you're already in it a few days at this point. Machining the front differential is a day's work once it's out. You pulling the engine and the trans and everything. This is all, we're talking over days of time here. I covered it in a few minutes, but you got at least a week into pulling the trans and the diffs out and machining them and getting all back together and making sure everything's perfect, because you have to check all the braking points as far as foot-pounds or newton meters are concerned. They want to know how many newton meters it broke at, the diff and everything, so that way you have the minimal amount of issues going back together. This time is, like I said, the fenders were already sent out. The bumpers were off just to get some of the stuff out. Even in the interior, we have to pull the interior apart, so you have to pull all the wiring through. The wire harness kind of wraps around the car. It goes from inside through the rear bump, out the back through the rear bumper and under the car for some of the emissions stuff. So there's a lot of clips. Like I said, you have to change all those clips. Some of them break, some of them don't. So when you break them, you got to change them. But it's a real tedious task because you don't want to ruin, damage, or anything. It's not like it's a used car or a 30-year-old car. It's a brand new car, and nobody wants to buy a brand new NISMO GTR for the $150,000 or $125,000 that they are, and then get it back with bumps and bruises on it. So it's very meticulous, time-consuming work, and everything gets taped. Everything that's not going to get repainted gets taped over, gets covered, and is handled with the utmost care. So that's our segment on this today. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them in the comments below. If you like this, please follow us and subscribe. If you have any questions regarding anything else, or even today's events or others, please watch our other videos and see if you like those. We do a lot of performance stuff. We do a lot of factory stuff. Let us know. It's TurboDave here at Performance Corner. Thank you, and have a safe one. Take care.